Okay, hey everybody, welcome to the Free Will Science and Religion podcast. I'm here with David Joseph and Chandler Klebs, and today we're going to continue on a theme we've been exploring recently, the idea of how punishment relates to free will. How would our world change in terms of like punishment and reward, I think also, as we shift from a free will, belief based perspective to the understanding that absolutely nothing is ever up to any of us in any fundamental sense. Chandler, why don't you start us off?
All right. Well, any punishment that's done will only be for deterrence and correction, basically. For example, I might be, angry at somebody who hurt me years ago, and yet I understand that no matter what I do now, even if I hurt that person, that's not going to help me now. So that's the thing. The only thing we could do is like if there's a person that you can talk to and say, well, you did this thing back then that really hurt me, and the only purpose of telling that person that would be so that if they care, they will learn to not do that to people in the future. And that works with, minor things like, you hurt my feelings type of stuff. But I think a lot of people are concerned about serious stuff like, somebody murdered or raped somebody. And a lot of people have this feeling that those people deserve to be punished, as in they actually fundamentally deserve something. And this is a tricky one to get across to people because people think that determinists are saying that we're just going to let everyone out of jail and that we're just going to let all chaos happen. And actually, it's kind of the opposite because, understanding that unless there is a change in the person or the circumstances that led them to do that crime, they will do it again, and that's the reason why they have to be in jail or something until there's a change where you know that there's no threat.
Exactly. I think like what people again are afraid of is that like if everybody understands that there's no free will, that we will lose our rationale for punishment. I hear these academic philosophers that should know better, assert that continuously, and again, like there's even kind of like within our current system, and I'm not, I can't completely say it believes in free will, but in other words, what I'm referring to is the mental health system, the psychiatric system. Nobody, just like with physical illnesses, nobody says, "Oh well, you got that illness of your free will, so you're to blame." It's the same thing with psychiatric illnesses. Like, nobody says to people who are depressed or anxious, "You're depressed or anxious because it's your fault," and all. At least the profession tends to not say that, right?
Well,
But
actually, my mom has experienced that kind of thing.
no, no, Chandler, I know. It's part of the culture, but my point is like institutionally, the basic, institutional position on this is that these conditions are genetic, they're environmental, they're not, and a person just doesn't choose them per se. And but my point in raising this is as citing it as an example where society already operates under the no free will perspective, but still, people who are in the mental health system, also have the understanding that that doesn't allow them to do whatever they want either. Now, okay, like in terms of punishment though, like for the general society, let's address Chandler. I think you were right in citing like the big crimes, the murder and just like horrible crimes. I think what people have to understand is that there is the need for the threat of punishment to serve as a deterrent. In other words, it has nothing to do with whether we have a free will or not. People, we need these rules and laws in order so people know that if they choose to do something that's harmful to others and they get caught, that yes, there will have to be some kind of penalty to be faced. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but like we just need that kind of system in order to maintain civilization.
Right. So I was going to ask. So what do you describe punishment as being? Like,
Excellent. Okay, so David, that's a great question. In other words, like if our prison system resembled, let's say, country clubs more, then a lot of people might say to themselves, well, like, maybe I should try to rob this bank because, like, if I fail and I get caught, I'm still like, playing golf every day, whatever, like in this prison. So I think punishment has to, unfortunately, and it's unfortunate because, like, when people do things wrong, it's really not up to them. Punishment has to entail some measure of a condition or circumstance that the person would prefer not to experience. Some kind of, like, I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is some kind of suffering. It's unfortunate, but just like when we discipline young children by grounding them or something, I think we have to apply this, not as a rehabilitative technique or strategy, but as a deterrent strategy.
Yeah. Here's my thought. I really think that community service needs to be done more. Um, where so that somebody is actually doing something that serves someone, and perhaps they are made to, like, if they do steal money, they have to pay it back. And I don't that probably happens a little bit already, but I think the primary thing should be, the only kind of suffering is that I think I could accept is a kind of suffering that, it might be an inconvenient thing, but yeah, you have to do something to fix the damage that you caused.
yeah, I kind of agree with the idea. Say, if a child's going to run out into the middle of a road and they're going to get run over, and you grab the child's arm, and it might include a slight amount of suffering to prevent the child from being hurt, or causing a bigger accident that hurts others. But I get confused when it comes to the idea of actually punishing people for things that it's not really their fault. If we go into the details of why that person robbed the bank, then we could just say, well, it's the fault of the competitive monetary market system that kind of put him in that position, and we go from there.
You're right, because basically I think what you're saying is, like, yes, we may need to have, some punishment. We may need to cause people some suffering, but under the free will perspective, we from that perspective, a lot of people want to cause other people a lot of suffering, a lot of unnecessary, unfair suffering, more suffering that is required for deterrence and more suffering that is required for the rehabilitation. So yeah, so like basically, like as our world, moves from the belief in free will, yeah, and so like then the question becomes is like what is the right amount of punishment that people will say, well, it's not worth it to try to rob the bank or whatever, because if I get caught, it's gonna like disadvantage me in some way. But under any circumstances, I think it's going to be much more compassionate and intelligent than our current system, based on free will belief.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess also, like, with punishment, then we also, again, Chandler, I think you were referring to this before. It's like with community service, like, the free will paradigm, doesn't, it rails against this community service stuff. It rails against, like, treating criminals with any kind of kindness because we say to ourselves they don't believe that they did something wrong of their free will and all. Whereas, like, intelligence and wisdom tells us that, like, if we treat them right, if we condition them, through community service, through education, through various means, we're going to be, like, much more effective at rehabilitation. When they get out of prison or jail or something, they're going to be much less likely to go back to a life of crime.
Yes. Yeah, I think it works that way. I mean, and I think what another benefit to the community service aspect is I think some people, when they get in that position of doing something that's good, something that serves the community, something that people like and enjoy, well then even their punishment can turn into sort of a reward at least, and they will get the feeling of satisfaction of doing something, and they may meet new friends, and I really think it has a rehabilitation as well as the deterrence.
That's an excellent point. For example, let's say, you get them to work, let's say, at a skill that they don't have yet. But instead of, let's say, working 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day, maybe they're working 10 hours a day for a few weeks or so. So there's kind of like a punishment element. But again, it's not like a severe vindictive punishment that's just seeking revenge. It's like it's for a positive purpose, and again, hopefully it's the least amount of punishment that's necessary. I wanted to just address another point related to punishment, because what happens is, like, when criminals are punished, they're punished in two ways. And I think overcoming the free will belief will minimize one kind of punishment. The first punishment I think we've been exploring is that some kind of like inconvenience at least has to happen to them that's going to serve as a deterrent for all of us, that we don't, like, we're motivated to not attempt the crime. But the other kind of punishment that I think is completely not just unnecessary, it's unfair and it's counterproductive, is that the way we view these criminals, from us as a public, to the newspapers that vilify these criminals, to the judges and the police officers and the corrections officers, basically the free will belief causes us to hate them, causes us to condemn them, to want them to suffer because they're bad people. So to the extent we move from this very harmful, very evil, I think, free will belief, all of a sudden, fine, we're telling criminals at every level, the newspapers, society, judges, we're saying to criminals, listen, the first point you have to understand is, like, you should not, quote unquote, blame yourself for what you did, because it wasn't your fault. Nobody's blaming you. Society's not blaming you. The criminal justice is not blaming you. You should still consider yourself as like absolved from this, but you still have to understand that in order to preserve our civilization, we have to, like, impose some kind of suffering for. In other words, we're explaining to them what we're doing in a way that allows them to maintain their dignity as human beings.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, the way we view people and the way that they view themselves has a tremendous impact, because, if someone views themselves as bad, I think that has a psychological effect that makes them act bad. And the reverse may be true too.
Absolutely, David. What do you think that does that resonate, or?
It does, yeah, it does make sense. I would also add that perhaps it's kind of like a punishment for them to actually be in the mindset to actually go out and commit a crime in the first place. There's got to be a certain level of discomfort within themselves, I think, before they go out and they rob a bank, or they try to take someone's wallet, or whatever they choose to do.
That's not
that they choose it freely, of course.
No, that's an excellent point. In other words, like, in terms of punishment, like, the free will paradigm has us direct all of our punishment on the criminal. Whereas, like, basically, if you want to, like, punish, like, if somebody does, like, for example, let's say a child does something wrong, a lot of times in our society, we'll understand, well, it's the parents' fault because the parents didn't teach them, right from wrong well enough. So the parents are somewhat culpable. So by that same understanding, I think that, like, if we're going to, like, punish, along with punishing the criminal, we have to punish ourselves as well as a society. In other words, like, punishment meaning, let's say, increased taxes to kind of, like, to pay for better schools so that people are better educated, so that people can, like, get jobs more easily and don't have to turn to crime.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So like, we've dealt with the punishment. Do you guys want to deal with the reward aspect some more? Because I think that's, people need to understand how like overcoming free will belief is actually, it's something that's good for us. It's good for everyone.
Yeah, and the thing is, reward is very important because I think reward is actually more effective than punishment. You know, for anything that somebody does, anything at all, there's got to be something they're getting out of it, some good benefit they're getting out of it. For example, people who smoke, they're addicted to cigarettes. Well, it's bad for their health, and they know that, but there's something that they get out of it. I've heard some say, well, that it relaxes them somehow, or it gives them something to do with their hands. And well, what it means, what the way I look at it is that it means is there's got to be a way for people to get a good feeling or reward doing something else that's less harmful. Because that's the only way. You can't just tell people, oh, don't do this, don't do that. They need to be given something to actually do.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Now, relative to the free will belief, I'm trying to connect that more directly. Basically, under free will belief, what we do that, or actually, I mean, the way I'm connecting it now is that one of the problems we have as a society is that some of us tend to do things better than others of us. Like some people are like much better athletes or much better, at whatever. They have certain skills, and again, our free will based education system, our society, leads us to then kind of like have this like hierarchical society where then there are the people who are the most worthy, and then there are lesser worthy people, lesser worthy, based on how well we do things, how maybe how good we are at rewarding society with our efforts. Now, one of the problems I see with that is that that creates a lot of arrogance and a lot of what I would call false entitlement by the people who are like blessed with special abilities.
Hmm. Yeah, people they're taking credit for their abilities,
Right.
and
So
yeah.
go ahead, Chandler.
Well, I just wanted to point out how irrational it is for them to do so, because that's like saying that they're better because they're of a certain gender or have a certain skin color, or they're better because they're human instead of a cockroach or something. It's they have no control over it.
Exactly. And this is going to be one of our challenges in getting people, especially the people who are in power, to accept that we don't have a free will. Because basically that means, like, for example, like the billionaires in the world, the people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, the rationale for their being able to like have and consume that much wealth, when people like at on minimum wage can't even afford the basic their basic resources, that rationale vanishes. In other words, like somebody might claim, well, yeah, Gates and like these billionaires deserve it because of their free will. They did all this. So fine, we might want to pay certain people like doctors. Like if you become a doctor, you have to go through 12 years of very, very difficult, training. And I think, in order to motivate people to go through that, that very difficult regime, I think we might want to pay doctors more than other people again as an incentive, as a reward. But then there have to be a limit. In other words, like, fine, they may make 3 or 4 times the average salary, but I'm not sure there's a rationale for giving them 10 or 20, or like CEOs in the United States, they earn 300 times the average salary. I mean, like, again, I think this overcoming free will belief would do a lot to make the world much more just in that way.
Yeah, and here's George, here's something that I've thought of. Certain things are incentivized. People are motivated to do certain things more than other things. Like take for example that sports is highly rewarded. If you are a pro sports player, Like even you can get scholarships based on being good in sports. You be very rich being based on sports. But you know what? I would rather people make more money from being a doctor than being a sports star. If you know what I'm saying.
Well,
Because of the good that a doctor can do compared to, somebody who wins basketball.
yeah. Actually, that's an interesting question, Chandler, because like I tend to agree with you in a certain sense, but there's another part of me that feels compassion for so many people that have like, you know, drudgery in terms of their 9 to 5 jobs that like, so much of our workforce is mechanized. A lot of people aren't very fulfilled, and so like in a certain sense, these sports figures, like when you see like amazing basketball players, like you know, they actually do, just based on like, based on so many people like watching them on TV and going to the stadiums, they actually fulfill, I think, an important service in terms of like, entertaining people who really, again, because of our society's like just dysfunctional in many ways, just, are really benefited from that, what do you call it? That separation from their ordinary lives. It gives them kind of like a respite. But again, I understand your point that like, that I think sometimes we overdo that. In other words, these sports stars don't, I think, require, or even the sports owners, they shouldn't be getting nearly as much as they do, because with the free will belief, again, comes at like, well, you make as much as you want because you earned it. But when we understand that we don't have free will, it's like people should make as much as is justified to get them motivated to do what they do. And then so like, yeah, that would be much less, I guess, that many people make now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, one other thing is like, I mean, everybody places value in different things anyway, and I get that. People, um, some people think that certain professions are more deserving than others, and it's weird. Like, so even though I think sports is absolutely useless, but you know what I mean. What I'm saying
Sure, no, I
is,
understand.
right. I mean, I view sports as useless, but I know that other people enjoy that. It's just that and I think that it can be done and it has a place, but and that's something that needs to be discussed, just like what really should be taught in schools. That's another thing. What sort of subjects are the most essential for people to know? And so what happens is, in order to discuss anything, there is a sort of value judgment system we're using, which is of course not up to us. That's what's so funny. But there is a system we're using to say that this is better for the society than this.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And a lot of it is just market based. In other words, like what marketers can succeed in getting us to want is what the market will promote, and that may not be in the best interest of everyone. I just wanted to go back to this punishment theme relative to like people kind of like understanding the injustice of believing in free will. Because I think we need to help them understand why they don't have a free will, and then why punishment is just so wrong. And one example that I use is like, let's say somebody is in a restaurant and like, and they, somebody, spikes their drink, puts something in their drink without their knowledge, and then this person will go out and commit a crime. Okay, now if you didn't know about the drink, whatever, then that's kind of like the equivalent of kind of like believing that they have a free will. They did the crime on their own, and they're going to be punished. They're going to be like, and they deserve it because that's their free will. Now, if you know, though, if you know that the person, through no fault of their own, they had no awareness, drank this drink that was spiked. I mean, not only would you not want them punished because you know they would be completely innocent, you'd defend them. If you were like in the trial where they were being accused, you would like stand up as a witness for them saying, listen, I know for a fact that this person is not fundamentally responsible because, this agent in the drink made them go out and commit the crime. So basically what I'm saying, we need to, I think, come up with examples like this to help people understand not just the wrongness of the incorrectness of the free will belief, but just how unjust, how unfair it is.
Yeah. And I think something needs to be said too about, even though there's like no complete first cause or self causer around, there's still, in a given situation, a certain crime was done. There's still the first person to initiate a subset of events. And I think people need to focus on that, realizing that, like, here's an extreme thought experiment. Like, somebody all of a sudden says, well, you know what? We own all the water in the world, and we're keeping you from drinking the water. So imagine that, okay, somebody's thirsty, so they go and onto property they're not supposed to, and they steal water. Well, you look at that sort of situation and you think, well, this is whack. People got to drink water, so let's do something about these idiots who are saying that they won't let anyone drink water. You know what I'm saying? There comes a certain point when, like, you're identifying, well, who started the problem? Well, so I mean, sure, somebody can say, well, the universe, by creating living things that need to drink water, created the problem, which is, in a way that's true. But you might identify the people who are keeping away access from the water as being the first cause of that specific situation.
Chandler, that's an excellent point. And like a lot of times when people, let's say, kids from inner cities commit crimes, society blames them and it just incarcerates them and ruins their lives, when the people we should be incarcerating or punishing, are the people who maintain the kinds of like unjust, like, no, these kids aren't getting good educations. These kids are not, their parents aren't given enough resources to enough food, enough clothing. I mean, just these basic necessities. And there are people in the world that are depriving, these people, these basic necessities, which is leading to their crime. So like, to the extent that we understand that these criminals, these kids do not have a free will, then we like you were saying, we look for the causes of how they came to the crime. And then when we see that, then we identify the people who, the politicians who are against these kinds of programs to help them, who just have no problem with the vast inequality that serves no one and it hurts so many people in so many ways.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about 2 minutes left. David, did we sufficiently cover, the matter of punishment relative to free will? Or are there any other points that we can address in the last minute and a half or so?
I think you hit most of it for now, but I would like to add to the idea of rewards. We have intrinsic value, intrinsic motivations, and extrinsic motivations. So when you introduce say kind of like a bribe, really, aren't you? You're saying, if you do this work, then we're going to give you this reward, and you're trying to get people to behave in that way. It's kind of like you're turning play into work and then work into something that they're not going to like eventually. If you're always dangling that carrot, and you're saying, if you don't do that work, you don't get that carrot,
You make a good point. I think one of the failings of our education system is that we don't teach our kids to enjoy. In other words, we teach them how to do math and how to do math well, but we don't teach them how to enjoy it. So
Right.
Most people don't enjoy it at all. Absolutely. So, all right. So we've got like about 40 seconds. Chandler, you want to finishing thoughts on this, or?
Well, I could respond to what you said about math, but that would just go off to another whole subject. That's a whole other podcast. But yeah, I don't know. Generally, I think we need to be focusing on rewards more than punishments, and realizing that reward and punishment are still realities with or without free will anyway.
That sounds great. All right, I guess that's it. So like I guess we'll see you again on free will, science, and religion. Thanks everyone.